Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have all of you joining in with us here. And I'm really excited to actually be in the first ever F-Up Club. Not very often do you get to say that in a public and company type event, and then not very often do you get to share these stories. So I'm really honored to be hosting this first one and to have all of you here with us. And I'm hearing from Xavi and Christopher today and myself on some screw ups in our lives, or F ups in our lives. And so I wanna start with a little exercise, and I know we can't all see each other at this point, but what I do want to do is, if you'll open up your chat function, I want to read a quote to you that many of us have probably heard by the great Michael Jordan. And he said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games, and 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." So I want you to take a minute, or a few seconds actually, and in the chat, I want you to type, when you think of the word failure, what is the one word that comes to you? And I would love for you to just start typing that into the chat area, but the one word that comes to you when you think of failure. And I love these: pain, learn, next, overcome, opportunity, defeat, learning, opportunity, experience. Failure equals what I eat for breakfast. I love that, Xavi. That's challenges, can't do it again, to be human. Wait for it. Those are great things. Development, I love that as well. Well, awesome. Well, keep those coming. Again, my name is Shawn Nason. I am CEO and founder of MOFI and the Disruptor League. So if you want to go out and follow us, that would be great. We are an experienced design and service design firm that has had a lot of failures in our life. So as well, we created something called the Disruptor League for people that like to disrupt industries and like to fail, because there's tons of learnings in that. So we are going to dive in. I'm really just honored to have two great disruptors in the industry with us. Xavi Cortadellas is the head of innovation and design from PepsiCo, and Xavi is going to be speaking to us on failures becoming failures. So, Xavi, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your story with the group.
Xavi, you're muted. Xavi, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so it seems that technology is on our side. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Thanks, Shawn, for the kind words. Definitely, if there is a lake of failure champions, come in, because I'm part of this club. So quick introduction about myself. Xavi Cortadellas, lead innovation and design for Gatorade, part of PepsiCo. Originally from Barcelona, originally a designer. I'm an architect, and I've been doing most of my career in marketing and sports. So 10 years in Nike, and now 10 years in Gatorade. So I'm kind of a sports guy, and I like to define myself as a troublemaker. So that and try to honor this every day at my job. So I will say, let's see if this works really quick. Perfect. So I will share with you a little bit about the GX case. And, there are some failures, but also there are some, happy endings, like any good movie in Hollywood. So a little bit of context, back in 2014, we kind of basically sit down as a team, kind of the innovation team, the design team, and with a very cool challenge is kind of, we were in charge of reinventing Gatorade, a brand with 50 years of history, a product, used by many athletes around the world. And we wanted to make it better, and was not easy and a huge responsibility. And also we wanted to, for this next generation of Gatorade, to think not for the next year, the next 2 years, to be something for the long run, and also kind of, thinking about sustainability. When your core business is on plastic bottles, definitely you need to think with this angle. And then we approached the exercise with, a very clear kind of hypothesis or assumption that we said, the future of sports drinks should be about personalization. Every athlete is unique, every athlete is different, every athlete sweats differently. So instead of coming up with a better formula of Gatorade, let's create the perfect Gatorade for every athlete. And definitely personalization, it's something already very prevalent in the sports. Athletes are using their personal fueling plans, their personalized equipment. It's just that nutrition and hydration in general was left behind. And then with this challenge and this in mind, and with the aspiration of bringing sports fuel personalization to millions of athletes, we decided to kind of take it easy and start with kind of an easy assignment. I said, well, the aspiration is millions of athletes, but let's start with just one team, 25 players in one of the best soccer teams in the world, and one clear milestone, World Cup 2014. And our goal was basically to try to help the Brazilian team to win World Cup. The program was very simple. We will create unique sports hydration solutions for each one of the players. We will test these players in the lab, figure out what they need, and develop unique formulas, unique bottles for them, and create the infrastructure to support this team during World Cup. We fail, or they fail. I don't know. This is probably the first failure of the story. Brazil didn't win World Cup. And for anyone who likes soccer, Gary Lineker said once that soccer is this sport that it's 11 against 11, and at the end Germany wins. And more or less this is what happened during World Cup, that Brazil was destroyed by Germany in quarterfinals. But still, the pilot was a success. We were able to prove that delivered personalization to 25 players was possible. Players adopt the innovation, players use it, the coaches in the team embrace that, and we see kind of improvement on performance for the players. Probably not enough to beat the German team, but still the platform worked quite well. And then we decided to say, well, 25 players done and check. Let's span this into other sports, into other audiences, into other types of teams. And then it's when the big failure happened. So the platform didn't work at all when we started expanding this into high school athletes and into kind of regular athletes. And we learned a few lessons. The first one is the premise was a sports fuel personalization, but the problem with sports fuel personalization and personalization in general is that it means different things to different people. Within pro teams, everything was about performance, about precision, and kind of getting this extra advantage that help you to run faster, jump higher, or win the game. When you talk with everyday athletes, they don't care too much about that. Sports nutrition and hydration is not top on their priority list, and they want basically a system that it's convenient, it's cool, it's sustainable, and it's not very disruptive on their daily routine. So the cool aspect and the easy to integrate in their routines, that was probably the key takeaways. Second, we come up with a system where we wanted to leverage technology, and I think that we overdosed the technology. And one of the key lessons here is that technology is not the solution for all problems. And what we said, kind of the example here, that sometimes pen on paper works very, very well, right? There's this story of NASA trying to invent kind of a pen that will work in the space without gravity and kind of in any circumstances and will never get dry. And the Russians were using a pencil. And sometimes kind of that's the way to go. Apply technology where you could get really an advantage and kind of let the other, non-tech solutions to solve your problems. And the next one is probably a key one is to limit the number of innovations that you want users to adopt. And when you do platform innovation, I think this is super relevant. Within Pro Teams, we come up with a very sophisticated system, integrating the smart caps, sweat patches, kind of recommendations back to the teams, scales to wait in and wait out the athletes, a solution that was directed to the coach, but with the ability to communicate with athletes. When you talk with everyday athletes, they just want their bottle and their fuel. That's it. All the other was kind of redundant, unnecessary, too expensive, too complicated to execute. So trim it down and kind of think about your audience and what they could really adopt. And then last but not least is this idea to not reinvent the wheel. The bottle that we designed for the Brazilian team was super cool. We come up with kind of a very innovative architecture that we had kind of the fueling, the Gatorade with these concentrate pods that we put on the bottom of the bottle, a small container, and then on the top, a smart cap that will be able to track the hydration of the players in real time. Super cool, but you bring this bottle to the real world, and it didn't work at all. It was too small. It required two-hand operation with the athletes. The pods were hard to recycle. So we needed to go back to step zero and kind of repurpose the original concept that we designed with the Brazil team and designed for the masses. And honestly, not a single component of the original platform was able to be reused when we start trying to scale up the platform for everyday athletes. And with that, we come up with kind of the core expression of the platform. And on that, what we call pods and bottles. Pods, this idea of a concentrate fuel from Gatorade, that way we want to leverage behavior fit. So it's kind of, if users are already using plastic bottles, let's replace this plastic bottle with a reusable bottle. Let's leverage water that is everywhere and kind of come up with a pod. And on this pod, instead of coming up with thousands of formulas, a matrix of formulas and flavors, and we will basically assign each one of the athletes to the right formula for them, and giving them more value to the pod and more value to the bottle. And on the bottle, and that was probably the big aha of the platform, when we start talking with high school athletes, we learned that what they wanted is to have a cool bottle. Is if I'm using my bottle and kind of I could add my name and number on that, instead of paying, $5 for this bottle, I'm willing to pay $30. I said, well, there is a business here. So we basically redesigned the whole bottle and kind of platform and kind of bringing value to the vessel and using the vessel and kind of this idea that this is your identity as an athlete, as a hook for the platform. And then the last piece of innovation here, and probably I will not have time to go deep on this one, was the best way to leverage technology was to unlock the sweat testing. So if with Brazil, we send our scientists to the field to test these Brazilian players, we needed a scalable way to test the sweat profile of each athlete. And with that, we have come up with this unique wearable one-time disposable sweat patch that we are launching next Monday, by the way, that will allow each one of the athletes kind of using their phone, basically create their unique sweat profile and come up with their unique formula. So going back to the technology slide, this is a good usage of technology. This allows us to scale up sports field personalization. And with that, we have the GX platform ready for prime time. Different bottle, different concentrate system, a digital product connected with a patch that allows us to sell these pods at Dick's Sporting Goods, Target, etc., and also at Gatorade.com. And the platform that was originally designed for one team and 25 players, this year we'll be able to sell millions of these pods and sweat patches to everyday athletes. So the original idea to unlock sports field personalization, we achieve it, but with multiple failures along the journey. And that's all what I have. So any questions, we could discuss more at the end. Any questions that you guys want, you could email me as well. And if you want to learn more about the platform, order your personalized sweat patch, bottles and pods, you could go to Gatorade.com and order some of these products.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Love hearing. I love hearing how those stories turn out in the midst of all of this. So thank you again for sharing that with us, Xavi. Yes, we'll have some time at the end as well for participants to share what they learned from all the presentations and questions. So awesome. We're actually a little bit above and ahead of time here. So again, I keep reading notes in here and love to see some of your thoughts. So if you want to add thoughts in to the chat, you can, or questions as well. I will be watching that. I will be taking the stage for just a moment to share a little bit around, and let me share my screen as well, around a quick journey and personal story. I will not have a lot of slides here, but I want to talk about that time that I told the university faculty that we need to do away with tenure. And in that moment, I just put a picture here of a building. In August of 2014, I was named the head of innovation, chief innovation officer for Xavier University here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Which is what led me to the great state of Ohio and where we live today. And in that time, I had not had a great deal of experience working in the higher ed and even understanding the higher ed culture. So I don't know how many of you in the room have worked with higher ed or have done some type of space there before, but it is a different culture. It's a different environment, very different even from the world of corporate America, or definitely from any other worlds. My challenge and the reason I was hired to be at Xavier was to start a Center for Innovation. And that Center for Innovation was to focus on bringing non-traditional revenue into the university. If you've studied much about the higher ed industry today, I actually believe it's one of the next industries that is going to implode because it's very expensive here in the States, and the ways costs are presented and manipulated. I hate to use that word, but it just seems very askew. In my first month at Xavier University, I was asked to do a all faculty and administration assembly and to share my thoughts on what my goal and my vision was for the university at the time. And so I did. And that's where I look back on my career and go, that was the biggest F up of my career, because I didn't understand the culture, didn't really know the audience, and didn't understand that the words that I was getting ready to say could actually hurt and make my career journey there a little bit painful. I gave my great vision, had great understanding, great buy-in to it, and in the audience, they opened it up for questions. And the very first question that was asked of me was by a faculty member. And this picture that I have here showing you this building is actually the new business school at Xavier University. and it was a professor of innovation from the business school. And she raised her hand and she just calmly said to me, Shawn, if you were going to transform, disrupt, and innovate higher ed, what is the very first thing you would do? And without thinking, without pausing, is when I just simply said, the very first thing I would do is I would do away with tenure from the higher ed system. Not understanding that 90% of the audience had tenure. And they had worked very hard for tenure. And I don't want to discredit, let me say this, I don't want to discredit how hard people work to get tenures at universities. But here was my reason for that statement. Is I was not a tenured faculty member. I was on the administration side. And my job could be done away with at any moment in higher ed. What I didn't understand is that the 90% of the people in the room that had tenure were basically guaranteed jobs for the rest of their life. And here was my frustration as an innovator. As an innovator, why are faculty members in university systems sitting and not innovating when you have a guaranteed job? And that's what I stated afterwards is I would do away with tenure, and here's why. Because people have become very comfortable, as many of us do in our jobs, and they quit innovating. And so we have a system in our world built in higher education that does not benefit students. And the other thing I said that I now look back on and say was a huge failure too, is I actually called the students consumers. And that we needed to meet the needs of our consumers on campus. And that right there was the moment I realized I am going to have an uphill battle, because first off, they didn't look at students or parents as consumers, even though they were writing checks and paying. And second is, as long as they were in a place where they had that covering of tenure, that they didn't have to innovate. They weren't forced to think differently. And I will share another that led to the reason that statement was made. Is in my master's program, I remember it plainly. I was in capital finance was the class that I was taking in my master's program at another school, and I was an executive master's program. And the textbook we were learning from was the professor's textbook that he had written around capital finance, but never had spent a day in corporate America doing capital finance. And it so happened at that time, and those of you that can see the screen, you see my picture of Mickey Mouse behind me. I was working for the Walt Disney Company for Disney Cruise Line in a capital finance role. And the model that he was teaching would never be a model that we would ever use in the real world example. So that is why, and I love some of the quotes and questions that are coming here and thoughts that are coming around. So what's the incentive to innovate? The fundamental question for many businesses and brand. That's very true, Xavi. Like they don't have a incentive to innovate. They have their offices. They have, right, higher ed didn't have it, but yet my job was to go figure out how to build non-traditional revenue sources for that whole space, because we needed more capital. And so my challenge to the 40 people that are listening to this is not to be scared, to still speak the truth. What I spoke was the truth to that organization, and I still today, from this platform, would say the thing that needs to happen in higher ed is that we need to do away with tenure and break the financial model that it's tied to. So I just want to make sure we've still got plenty. We're ahead of schedule today, which means we can have a lot more discussion at the end with the three of us. But I do, and just a couple comments here, that their fear was employment, your ambition was growth, and the end user needs were unexpressed. Love that, Christopher. Curious what others would say their first thing they would be. Mine would be to look at the vision and blockers to that vision. Oh, I love that. And I love what we're getting there. So I'm going to stop sharing and keep the comments coming because would love to have a discussion afterwards. But I want to bring to the stage now Christopher Bailey, Senior Product Manager from ExxonMobil, who's going to discuss with us delivering value early as a means of tackling the prospect of failure. So Christopher, take over the stage and share with us your journey.
Sure. I guess just to give a little bit additional background for myself. I'm a product manager within ExxonMobil, focused in on the area in IT, and always looking for those areas where we can drive new forms of energy, or get better with our sustainability, all those kinds of things, as it has to do with IT's play within energy, which is always a weird spot. You're sort of internal IT to the organization. You're trying to be that digital part, not sort of the back office kind of things, but helping them imagine the future. And so that's what most of my career's been on. I really like what Shawn actually brought up there at the very beginning with this question of, what's that word that you think of when you think about failure? And for me, the word is regrets. And as I think about friends of mine that have struggled in the past with things like challenges that they've had, or failures that they've had, even myself. One of these situations comes to mind where actually a friend of mine who was a product owner of a software team, it was just a bunch of developers that would essentially get requirements brought in. They would churn out different products based off of that. And he was told last year that his development team was going to be broken up. They were doing really well. They were really well respected, but he was getting told now that they're going to get broken up. And he struggled a lot with that, feelings of regret and failure, that they had done something wrong associated with this. And in reality, what was happening is that the organization was shifting from a functional organization framework to a more product-based framework. And so all of those developers would be embedded in teams that were more focused in on the products and not sort of that functional silo of development. But still, you still feel that feeling of regret and pain, and did I do something wrong, and all of that. And I think that's the big question for us here. And what I'd like to focus on with some of the thoughts I'm going to share is, when have you felt that time when the project got canceled, or the team got shut down, or whatever? When did you last feel that, and what were the feelings that you had around that? And I bet you one of those things was regret, feeling like there was more that we could have done. And that's a lot of what I heard a bunch of times last year is, well, if we only had more time, or, well, we spent all this time and we haven't delivered the thing that we were needing to. And that door can just really close on us fast when the world is just changing so rapidly around us. So that's the piece that I want to explore through a couple of different stories, is how do we address that element of regret, so that regardless of what happens with a really rapidly changing world, that we're able to actually drive towards some broader benefits. So what I'm going to do, you're actually going to hear a couple of different stories here from me. and hopefully some suggestions out there of a way in which we can work that may reduce the chance that we feel that regret afterwards. We feel more successful. So let me bring up the first story here. First one, about 8 years ago or so, I was brought in to lead a team in ExxonMobil IT that was going to help us innovate. And the IT organization was trying to figure out, what does that look like? How do we innovate, especially internal to the organization? What does that look like, us working with others? All of those things. And I spent about 7 years there, and we released some really amazing products. We had a lot of folks that wanted to work with us, not just within IT, but across all of the different business units. We had things that were training classes, the Innovation Catalyst, the Entrepreneur Bootcamp. We had podcasts, the hashtag InnoCast. We had crowdsourced platforms that we built, Spark, and we had tools and practices for people, like physical tools. Come in here, and this will help you innovate with the InnoKit. And we felt really good with this. And after about 7 years, I was shocked when our manager came back to us and informed us that the team was getting disbanded. And I was just completely floored in hearing this. I was realizing that it's all over, and I sat there with that regret of, like, did I do something wrong? What did we do wrong? I understood their rationale, like they wanted to embed some of the skills in different areas, but I kept thinking there was so much more that we had to give, and we weren't finished with the things that we were trying to do, and the organization still need to change. There's so many different things, but it felt unfinished to me. And so I felt like a failure, like we had just completely messed things up. And one thing that I would highlight from this experience is that we had great success, but not many people were actually from the leadership team coming back and coming in and being supportive and all of that. And so it was really easy for us to get forgotten out of that whole scenario. So I was sitting there just trying to figure that out just myself, and talking to a lot of friends about how we might address this, and what had I done wrong. And there are plenty of people telling me, well, just don't worry about it, just focusing on the things that you can control and whatnot. But that wasn't really satisfying. Other people would point to our accomplishments and, well, just think about the legacy that you created, and that wasn't satisfying either. And finally, a friend sat down and talked to me about and reminded me of the way in which we worked. We had tried to learn from the startup mindset of work on a low budget, deliver value early, those kinds of things. And that was the one thing that made me feel better about it. It helped me to focus less on all the things that we had yet to do, and focus more on the things that we had accomplished and the learning that we got and where we were able to get the organization to at that point. And so that startup mindset was really, really helpful for us. And that gave us this ray of sunshine out from that. Now, some of you might be asking, like, well, how does a big organization think like a startup? This actually took me a little bit to think through. And just real quickly, one of the things, I think you're probably more like a startup than you think. So, and that's because both sides feel very similar pressures, whether you're a big company, mid-size, or super small. You probably all have low budgets, multiple opportunities. You can't do them all, minimal staffing. We've all experienced those things. And unfortunately, especially in large organizations, we placate ourselves by talking about the long-term view and bets that pay out over years. And this makes it easier to let value sit on the table because, well, I've got time to deliver that later. And I just ask ourselves, like, do we really have that time anymore? Hasn't our experience, not just in like the last year, but since like 2009, just taught us that the world is changing faster than we're really prepared to adapt. And so if we're not thinking through that lens and delivering value early, then yeah, we're going to feel like failures afterwards. And so that this way of working can help us with reducing the chance that we feel like a failure afterwards. Let me just give you an example of this. Three questions that we like to use to think this way. First is, what has to be true? So in order for this to be successful, then this has to be right. How can we quickly validate if it is? And then how will we know we're successful? Let me give you one example of this with one of the products that we have built. The #InnoCast was an internal podcast that was run by a friend and I, and it started with a problem to solve. We were spread too thin. We were trying to coach a lot of teams and answer questions to the point where I just said one day, I just repeated the same explanation to this team that I did for 10 others. So I wish I could just hit record and play that one time for everybody. And we were both into podcasts. And so we said, well, why don't we just try podcasting internally? So we decided to give that a go. But we immediately came up against that question of like, well, what if people didn't listen? And so here we tried to flip that script. And so we thought about that main failure point. What could go wrong first with this? And then let's actually just design our work around that to tell ourselves whether or not we should keep going. And so we went out, we actually put a little post out there to say, hey, we're interested in doing this, who might listen? And we got, about 100 responses. So we felt pretty good with that, but it could have been individuals sort of lying to us or just telling us what we wanted to hear. And so we did another small thing where we said, we're going to create a 3-minute teaser, and we posted that. And that actually got a whole bunch more people just listening. This is without a platform or anything internal to do that. And so we had more people that were clicking through, and that gave us some data to feel like, okay, let's make that next bet. So that helped us to quickly validate whether or not we were going to fail early on this, and fail fast, if you want to think of it that way. And it gave us a measurable output, not just what people were saying, but what did they do? Fast forward a little bit, and we had built a web platform for not just our podcast, but allowed other people to build their own podcasts internally. It was called On, and we had a couple of episodes of ourselves under our belt in a growing community. And we decided we were going to jump the shark early, and we recorded an episode with Mike Brown, who at the time was the CIO for ExxonMobil. And so lots of visibility potential for us on this, probably, maybe more risk than we thought we should have taken. But after he left the recording, and the recording went well, he said he hoped that he was going to get a couple thousand listens to that episode. That was what good looked like to him. And we kind of laughed, knowing that we were only getting about 100 listens for each episode at that time in the early days. And but we didn't mention that to him. We sort of thought that he was joking, because that was a huge number for us. Well, he saw the listens that his episode was getting and came back to us and tried to help us by saying, you need to make your episodes smaller. And now our episodes were about 20 minutes long. And if you look at an industry, most episodes for podcasts are about 60 minutes. So ours was already relatively small, but he was coming at us with that idea. Now, we recognize that he was trying to solve the same problem that we were, of increasing listenership. So that was his solution to it. We had a separate solution. We were noticing that people were actually hacking our solution. This is probably another failure of ours, was that we didn't immediately make it easy for people on the go to listen. And so we were missing out on this big market. And that was our solution to increasing listenership, was let's actually get more people on. So the big question then is like, what do you do now? Do you just listen to your VP, your CIO that says, make them smaller, or do you ignore him and create the mobile experience? And I think this is another area where we can avoid the failure, because if we had chosen the smaller episodes, we would have immediately failed. And so the thing that we ended up doing was we decided we were actually just going to do both. And so we did some A/B testing between the two. And what we found out through the data was that we actually saw a decrease in listenership if we made smaller episodes. But if we made a mobile experience, then that actually increased listenership. And so through some small experiments, we were able to prove that out, provide some data, and show that back to Mike Brown. And we said, great, let's go forward with that, because he was great. He understood that this was not necessarily about his idea. It was more about increasing the listenership, and so it didn't matter which solution actually won within that. So we just continue to repeat that process, and through to today. Others have been inspired to create their own channels. We have, over 50 channels out there, 22,000 listens. This is all internal to the organization. So those numbers are meaningful when you're thinking about internal to a company. My favorite example was a guy that was retiring, and he knew a bunch about concrete. And so he created a channel of him talking about the topic and his own experience. And so that, what a great way to manage our own knowledge through that. Our own #InnoCast now has about 120 episodes, about 1,000 listens per episode now. And so that ended up working out for us because we were using that approach. And so there were a couple of these different failure points that if we had just done what the manager said, or even tried to guess what the users were going to want, then this could have all fallen apart. So the thing that you may notice here too is that in no place did we actually ask for permission. I think that's another place where there's probably some early failures that we might have hit, just because our managers aren't going to have that amount of data to help decide or determine whether or not something's going to be successful or not. So anyway, those are a couple of examples from our side. So these are the questions again that we try to use, and even though we've had things where the entrepreneur bootcamp, that was another one that I had shown up there before. We tried it out. It did not work because we actually couldn't get the internal customers. We actually couldn't identify the customers that had that problem we were trying to solve. We had a really great solution, but no customers coming to that. And this mindset that we used helped us to be able to identify those failure points early and pivot our way towards different options. That way, even though when things got shut down eventually, or even the micro product got shut down, we didn't feel burdened by, we spent too much time, and we actually felt energized because we were able to get something out and test it and feel successful through that. So that's a bit of my experience within there. I'll suggest a couple of books if folks haven't read them. One of my favorites, actually podcasts, is How I Built This. Really great one, and Sprint by Knapp. He's a great author and wrote that book out there. So some good examples that other folks can enjoy if you're looking for some ways to think through that. So that's my tales.
Awesome. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for sharing. That's another great great story for us to share. So, all right. Well, it has come to that time where we have time devoted for you guys that have been listening to share what you've learned from these presentations and to add your own stories. So here is what I am going to ask. Is if you would like to share something with us or ask a question of us, is that you actually raise your hand. If you don't know where that is, look at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There should be a raise hand button. And raise your hand, and we will actually pull you up here on stage with us. If you don't want to do that, and you want to stay hidden a little bit, you can also put your questions in the Q&A function, and I will read those as well. So if you would like to ask a question, share a story, you can either do it through raising your hands or through the Q&A function. One question here, Joanna, and I am sure you can answer this for us, is how do we get copies of the presentations? I'm assuming everyone that has attended and registered can get copies of these, correct, Joanna?
Correct, and we're also recording these sessions as well, and will be available on demand.
Oh, awesome. Anyone else? Questions, thoughts, shares with us before we finish up here today? And I'm also just checking in the chat function, make sure I'm not missing anything. Some great conversation. Awesome. So let's start from Jennifer, who says, I'm wondering roughly how long it took you and your teams to recognize that you had a failure, assess it, and get to the next iteration. So Xavi or Christopher, do you want to share on that one?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So on Jennifer's question here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm thinking more about some of the products that we're currently working on. One that we're doing right now is trying to gamify the experience of transforming to an agile organization and putting some of that into folks' hands. And there's been some things that we've tried that didn't quite work out. But the way that we learned that earlier was we actually just decided at the beginning what are the metrics that we're going to use in order to determine whether or not we're successful, and then use that to essentially decide whether or not, yes, this is working for us or not. So very, very specific example on this, we put a new feature into the product, and we said this feature we believe is going to increase the amount of clicks that we get on this, and the amount of times that people make this do this transaction, if you will. And so we put it out there, and because we had already decided that like this is the way we're going to measure it, then the weeks afterwards that we were taking a look at that afterwards, we were able to make a decision and say like, okay, actually that didn't work out. And so that's the thing that's worked really well for us to recognize that, hey, we had something that didn't work out, or we tried, or we put a feature out there. So it's sort of that mindset of like, what's a quick micro experiment? What's the smallest piece of that product that I can get out there? And then how am I going to measure success? And if that's a part of your process, I think that makes it easier to recognize when something has gone wrong and react to it faster.
Yeah, love the thinking, Chris. But very similar. I love this idea of experimentation. For us, the first thing that we try to avoid the word test, because on a test, you fail or you pass. We love to use the word pilot and approach each one of these interactions as pilot. And when we go with a pilot, we go with a very humble approach that said, let's assume that everything will fail, right? And then take as many lessons as possible. So for us, it's to do as many pilots as possible along the journey and ensure that we are documenting these pilots the right way. So you do the pilot, you take lessons and apply these lessons and move to the next one. So almost, that's the reason I was saying that failure for me is, part of my breakfast is kind of assume that these will happen along your journey. And then I think it helps also to take a little bit the drama out. It's kind of, the fact that you put things out there that do not work perfectly, and it's fine, it's part of the learning. I think that, people embrace that. Typically in this approach, the problem is that you could have a team that is very comfortable with this methodology, but maybe upper management, external stakeholders, etc., could struggle a little bit on that. So I will cautious a little bit on the storytelling on how you approach this pilot approach and how you explain internally what these failures mean, right? Because maybe for some people, the failure could be, I shut down the project.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Jennifer. And I would just ditto what they say. And I think my advice, as much as Xavi, I always start at the beginning with this is a pilot. This is, we're going to learn from this. And so if it doesn't work, it's great. If it does work, it's great. So great advice. So thank you for that as well. Lasita, I know you were brought up on stage, and then I also saw your questions. So let me make sure to answer those. So Lasita would like to ask, how can upcoming innovators like myself and others achieve disruption and impact on our way to business success? And what principles or rules should upcoming innovators live by to stay disruptive in pursuit of moving humanity forward? So let me give the first question to you, Xavi, of how can upcoming innovators like myself and others achieve disruption and impact on our way to business success? What would be your advice on that one?
Yeah, I think someone said on the chat before that inspired a little bit by your talk, that Shawn, that the merit of innovators is that they want to make the world better, right, and kind of improve things. So I think, to me, mindset number one is to observe around you and look for opportunities across everything that you touch on a daily basis. I think that's kind of a mindset that, to me, it's very important. And the others that I challenge many people in my team and many people I have worked with, this is a solo effort. So you need to bring others along, period. If you are not able to convince others on your beliefs, on your journey, on kind of embracing this idea of piloting, failure, etc., it's a lost cause. And probably the number three that I think it's a very important personal capability is in Gatorade, we used to joke that you need to have alligator skin, right? It's kind of, you need to be tough and embrace the idea that not everyone will share your vision. Not everyone will be on board. Shawn, your story was perfect. It's kind of the teachers and faculty, they didn't want to change. And kind of you guys are solid no from the beginning. And that's part of the game. And even sometimes your manager will not be comfortable with your approach. Christopher said the same. Is kind of sometimes don't even ask for permission, right? So, but you need to have kind of a lot of self-confidence, honestly, with you, your team, your stakeholders, and that get the no's and not get the right funding and all this stuff. That's part of the journey. That will be my kind of 3 pieces of advice.
I'll add on to that. I chafed for a while at the idea that
Christopher,
you had to be a politician in order to be an innovator, and that it, because I didn't like the idea of like, oh, you're sort of selling, you're tricking people or something like that. But the thing that I realized that is good about politicians, like what goes well there, right? Let's put all the bad stuff aside. What goes well there is when they're able to create coalitions and bring people together to work towards a goal. That's the thing. So it maybe to a bit of I think it's Lassetti's question there too. You have to bring other people along with you, because it can otherwise it's going to be really, really lonely. The other thing that I'd suggest is the more that you can fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve versus the solution you're just trying to bring to the table. One, that's going to let you iterate a whole lot faster. Also, when your idea doesn't work, it's okay. Like, you can move on to the next thing because you're not bought into the solution itself. You're bought into, I really want to solve this big customer problem or whatever that may be. And so what that means is, so for me, when I came to work for ExxonMobil, the main thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to help them find new sources of energy. I wanted to be the green guy. And if I'm working in upstream oil and gas portion of ExxonMobil, that's going to struggle. I'm gonna have some problems with that because that's not where their mindset. That's not the problem that they're trying to solve. But if I learn more about the company, there's other places like corporate strategic research that's looking at algae and biofuels and solar and all these things. And I can go over there and say, great, what sort of problems are you trying to solve? And so some of it is about navigating where they are trying to solve a problem and finding that place. And if you could do that, that makes it much more fulfilling. You feel like you're able to contribute a little bit better.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Love technology. My computer froze there, but I think I'm back. So let me ask this question. It's easy to look back on failures that lead to success, but how do you work through the pain at the time? And our answer cannot be alcohol. No.
So maybe I can start because I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't drink. So what are my things that I do? Yeah. Honestly, learning about resiliency is really important. I think Adam Grant and Brene Brown both have really great content literature. Simon Sinek as well has some really great stuff. But you have to figure out where your energy comes from. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert, and so my energy does not come from presenting to others. Like, that actually drains it, but I can still do it, right? What I have to do is that afterwards, I'm going to go and play some video games for a couple of hours. But you have to figure out how you actually draw energy. And the way that I do that, yes, is through video games, but my main trick is gathering a lot of people around me that can be confidants. That's how I worked through the challenge of the innovation team getting shut down, and how personal that felt for me. Was I went and I just had meetings most of the days where I wasn't working. I was just talking to other people to try and process that. And having that avenue where you can talk to other people and they can hold up the mirror is super important for innovators. I'll also plug Catalyst Constellations. My friend Shannon Lucas over there does some great work about helping innovators like ourselves be resilient.
Yeah, I love that, Christopher. It is finding that spot. We actually call it finding your swarm. So more than your tribe, but your swarm. And I'll share a little bit about that before we close out today in our new book called Kiss Your Dragons. So, but yeah, so that's some great there. Let me see. Xavi, so from the lessons learned, how are you innovating differently now?
That's a good one. I think that probably putting a little bit more attention on the initial hypothesis, right? So, super easy to say, yeah, we go to the field, it's a pilot, if nothing works, it's not at the end of the world, etc. I think that typically approaching on these initial hypotheses in a more cohesive way, kind of learning, taking as much input as possible from your team, from other stakeholders, etc., just to refine kind of exactly what's the problem to solve and what could be the critical pain points. I love Chris' sentence on the first one, what has to be true, right? I think that if you look at yourself and said, well, for this to succeed, you need all these things to happen. And sometimes, just doing kind of this due diligence upfront with a little bit more rigor, I think it helps to kind of kill some ideas or some diversions from the drawing board and kind of jump up to probably what you have more chances to be successful. And I think something that Chris said also on the value of the team, and also kind of this idea of fall in love with the problem versus the solution, I think that's very true. I think, to me, when I look at things in perspective, I tend to be, maybe as a designer, it's kind of, you get in love with the artifact, right? With the solution, etc. I said, well, this is perfect. It looks really cool, etc. This is it. And you really believe in that. If you take more a humble approach, embrace the problem and listen to others, and then almost what I always said, kind of play Switzerland. I said, I don't know what the solution is. We'll figure it out together. I kind of be a little bit more humble on that versus that this is it, and kind of you believe that you're right and the others are wrong. I tend to move away from these pre-assumptions as much as possible, and that, I think, increases your chances for success.
Awesome, thanks for that. So Bernardo, how can you grow from a failure? How can you grow from a failure when you cannot identify what led to the failure? And I'll Bernardo, I think the big thing is to be, and Xavi and Christopher would probably agree, to be in innovation, you just have to know that you belong there. And this comes back to those mindsets, like, Christopher talking, we actually use that one, Christopher, fall in love with the problem. We use a mindset of go where the love is. So find those around you. We use one around bias towards action. And knowing that, but then knowing your heart sets, and I'll share with the group here, and I'll put it in the link there. We just wrote a book called Kiss Your Dragons. And it's actually the shift of thinking from just mindsets to heart sets. And that's where I think when you cannot identify what led to the failure, that's when you have to go back, Bernardo, to your heart. You may not be able to identify. We work a lot in the healthcare space, our organization does. And there are times when we can, as plain as day, see what the answer is. But because healthcare is so slow at moving, much like, the energy, right? Christopher wants to make energy more green. But he's working for a company that depends on what's not making it green. So it's that you're going in as to have an innovation or a disruptor mindset. In my opinion, you have to have the hoopsa to survive in it, because if you don't, it's just it will be. I guess it'll be disheartening, because my opinion is probably 99% of all things innovation fail or don't move forward. So you have to get that internal heart set. And I did just post in there, you guys, the Amazon link in the chat room if you're interested in picking up a copy of the book. It's a real easy read. It's conversational. It's 3 of us that wrote it, and actually how 3 of us. One is an ex chief innovation officer from the healthcare space, myself, and someone, Michael Harper, who has just a real interesting background. And it was our whole heart mindset conversation. It's just a conversation with the 3 of us. So if that helps, Bernardo, I hope that answers that. I want to be
okay. I'd like to add on to that just real quick. The problem that happens if you can't identify what led to the failure, is probably a design of it. Now, if I'm looking at something like, the team got shut down and I don't know why that failed. Well, that didn't have sort of an experiment around it. But I can talk to other people around me to get some insights. So, talking to your users, talking to stakeholders, getting their insights, asking them that got to jump out there and do that and see if you can gain some of those insights. The other way that you might need to look, if you're running in that situation frequently where you're not getting the data that you need, it might be a problem in experiment design. And I can't say enough about doing that really well. Just jumping out and trying something is not going to actually get you the data that you need to tell whether or not something's work or not. I love Xavi's examples there, because you could tell that there was data behind those decisions, and not just we felt like it wasn't going that well or whatever, right? So make sure that you've got some good experimentation design when you're building this.
Yeah, I love that. Got about 4 minutes left and 2 questions I want to make sure. So any suggestions to get everyone on the same page to make innovation more rewarding? So any suggestions to get everyone on the same page? Mine is one way. Go ahead, Xavi.
No, you go, Shawn.
I think mine is much about, we've said it several times here, but that go where the love is. When you're in big organizations, you've got to find that person or that senior leader that will go along the journey with you to show that innovation is rewarding. My concern, and this would be another topic for us to have, is I think the word innovation is getting wore out as well too. And what does innovation really mean anymore? Especially in our world today. So, but I would say go where the love is. Go find that person to meet with.
Shawn, just to build on that, I think very similar. I love to use this concentric circles analogy, that the inner circle is you, the second circle is your team, and then keep building these circles and bring people within the circle. The more people embrace the problem and embrace the journey, the easier it will be to drive change within the company. And sometimes, especially if you are getting traction within your innovation, I'm thinking more kind of about platform innovation, the type of examples that Chris was sharing, you will need to bring a lot of people in. The podcast example, I think, was phenomenal, just to educate people on that. So take out kind of the troublemakers, but you will find ambassadors on each one of the cross-functional teams that you think that they could have a similar mindset, etc. bring them on. And it's kind of, if they participate on the process, they will be on your side. So I think that on this idea of concentric circles, that's what I try to do all the time. And keep inviting people, keep bring them on. And then when you have problems along the journey, you could call them back, help me on this, help me on that. I think that works very well in big corporations.
Well, while your mic's unmuted, Xavi, and we're getting to the end of time here, and this is a question that all three of us can answer. What is the one thing you would recommend to the people that are listening to this on how to live in the space of innovation? So, Xavi or Chris, you want to answer that one?
Passion. I think that's passion for the problem, passion to getting there, resilience. But to me, it's about passion, Shawn, very similar to what you were suggesting.
Awesome. Chris?
I would point to being okay with and finding ways to get your customers not to lie to you. They're going to, not because they're trying to be mean, but because they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. And so just, get good at asking questions in ways that anchor them to the past or anchor them to things that they've done in the past. Otherwise, if you get them hypothesizing in the future, they're just hypothesis, and that's as good as your own guesses.
Love it. And mine would be similar to what we just said. Lean into the things that you fear the most. And that fear an organization the most. And again, where we called it kiss your dragons. Because if you can get to the root of those or fall in love with the right problem, right, you can really make significant change in the innovation space. So it is 4:10. I want to thank everybody for listening today, being a part of the first F-Up Club. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Xavi, for this. And we look forward to seeing you at more of these. So have a great weekend, and we will talk to everyone later.